Welcome to the BC Refugee Hub webinar. My name is Bahar Taheri. I'm the project consultant for the BC Refugee Hub, and I will be guiding us through today's webinar. We're all here at the AMSA office in Burnaby. I wanted to say thank you to AMSA for providing us with technical support this morning for this webinar. And we also want to thank our funder. The BC Refugee Hub would like to gratefully acknowledge the financial support of the province of British Columbia through the Ministry of Jobs, Trade and Technology. The BC Refugee Hub is funded by the province of British Columbia and it's administered by the Immigrant Services Society of BC, or ISS of BC. So we'll move on to the agenda. So I'll provide some updates from the BC Refugee Hub. And then we'll move on to our training on how to use the Domestic Violence Safety Assessment and Planning tool. We'll also be providing some supports and resources, and then we'll have a Q&A session. This webinar topic has been informed by a feedback survey we conducted with the settlement and integration sector. Many survey respondents expressed a need for training with resources and information on supporting refugees and refugee claimant women facing domestic violence. Many also expressed the need for regular trainings like this for staff as ongoing professional development. This webinar is suitable for frontline workers, coordinators, managers at settlement service provider agencies, as well as community stakeholders who work and support refugees and refugee claimants from the time they come to BC during the claim process and when a claim decision is received and they become PRs. The webinar today will provide a training on how to use the assessment tool along with supports and resources. And like I said, we'll finish off with a Q&A session with Rosa. So I'd just like to highlight a couple of recently released resources in our upcoming training sessions. We recently released our quarterly bulletin on refugee claimant arrivals for the third quarter of 2019. This bulletin gives a snapshot into refugee claimant arrivals in the Lower Mainland. Our next bulletin will be released in January and will include a 2019 roll-up and stats from the fourth quarter as well. We're also pleased to present two workshops titled Evaluating Programs for Refugees, taking place one in Surrey and one in Vancouver. These workshops are being offered in collaboration between the BC Refugee Hub, the Centre for Community-Based Research, and the Evaluation Capacity Network. Each workshop is a free full-day workshop and designed to build capacity to conduct community-based evaluations for groups or organizations in the settlement sector. Rebecca Gokert and Jason Daniels from the Evaluation Capacity Network at the University of Alberta and Kathy Sherrill from ISS of BC will be co-leading the workshops. So the Surrey one is on December 5th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the City Centre Branch Surrey Public Library. And the Vancouver one is on December 6th at the ISS of BC Welcome Center. The deadline to register is November 29th. You can find the registration link on the BC Refugee Hub right on the front page there. And note that there's a registration limit of 3 participants per organization for Vancouver and Surrey combined. If you have any questions about these sessions, you can contact me at refugeehub@issbc.org. And then next up, we recently released a comprehensive list of free English conversation circles that refugees and refugee claimants can attend. There's a need for additional opportunities for refugees and refugee claimants to practice and develop English conversation skills. And for refugee claimants, often free or low-cost conversation circles and groups are the only resource they are eligible for while their claim is being processed. So this webpage has been created for quick access and easy referrals. The webpage will be periodically updated with new circles and groups as they come up. If you know of a circle or group not listed, please email me and I can add it to the webpage. Also, with the new year, schedules will be changing, so please send your new schedules along as well and I can update the webpage as well. The link for that comprehensive listing is right on our front page as well. So I keep referring to the front page. The front page is essentially the What's New section. So you can check this daily, weekly, but we really do update it frequently. The What's New section is our blog posts, and anything new on the hub will show up there. So I'd also like to invite organizations to send along any programs, services related to refugees in BC, and we can post them there. All the information posted is related to refugees in BC, which includes events, resources, new programs, reports, and fact sheets. Everything is also posted on our social media channels, which is at BC Refugee Hub. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Okay, so let's get started with our training today, now that you've had a little update from the BC Refugee Hub. Please welcome our speaker and topic expert, Rosa Elena Artiga, Manager of Direct Services and Clinical Practice at the Battered Women's Support Services, or BWSS. Rosa has been working in the anti-violence field for over 20 years, delivering workshops on violence against self-identified girls and women, and providing training to service providers at the national and international level. In her role as Manager of Direct Services and Clinical Practice, she oversees a number of programs within BWSS. Since 2008, Rosa has researched and addressed the issue of battered women being wrongfully arrested. She has been successful with a number of police complaints. She has addressed this issue at a systemic level. Rosa is wildly passionate about her work, which is framed in a decolonizing, feminist, and anti-oppression practice. In February of this year, we hosted a webinar titled How to Support Refugees and Refugee Claimants Who Are Facing Domestic Violence. In this webinar, Rosa provided an introductory overview on the topic of domestic violence and how frontline workers and agencies can support newcomer women. Part 1 is available on our website under trainings, and I also posted it in our e-newsletter so everyone could access it prior to this training. So today in part 2, Rosa returns to provide more in-depth training on this topic. In this session, we will be launching the new safety assessment and safety planning tool that Rosa has developed in partnership with the BC Refugee Hub. This webinar will provide training on how to use this new tool to complete safety assessments and create safety plans for clients facing domestic violence. Welcome, Rosa.
Thank you, Bahar. Good morning, and thank you everybody who came to participate in this second webinar. And I think that we are all very lucky to have this tool. I come with many years of experience, and part of my work is to oversee the intake and crisis line at Battered Women's Support Services. But before me, there were many women who started working at Battered Women's Support Services, and they have provided information, and they have made research around how to assess for safety, lethality, and how to make plans with women who are experiencing violence. So I think you're very lucky to have access to this new tool. I checked with other service providers, and they were very impressed about the content of the tool. So I really encourage you to pay attention to how apply the knowledge through this webinar, and also to access the tool and to provide the support and the right support to all the women who access your services. So you already are familiar with Battered Women's Support Services, so I'm not going to get into what we do, just to go more into the content of the tool. So I wrote a disclaimer. So the information presented in this safety assessment tool and accompanying PowerPoint deck training tool are not intended to be and does not constitute legal advice. Immigration law changes quite frequently. Do not, under any circumstances, rely on information found in this tool as legal advice. Legal matters are often complicated. For assistance with your specific legal problem or inquiry, please contact a lawyer. Please see the resources section for free and low-cost legal support services. So it's very important that You just follow the tool to gather information, and also as a way to remember some resources that you need to provide, maybe legal information that you need to search for the woman. Sometimes we as workers, we feel that once that she's answering the questions, we have information to put pressure on her to leave. So I have heard from other service providers that sometimes they ended giving the wrong information. And once that the woman left an abusive relationship, she didn't have the right protection through the criminal justice system or through the family law system. This intake form and a safety assessment planning tool has been specifically developed for women and self-identified women. From heroin, from the purpose of this tool, any mention of woman or women refers to anyone who has self-identified as a woman for their gender identity. If the person comes from the LGBTQ two spirit non-gender conforming communities, it is important to have the proper training and adequate resources to support this person internally in your agencies. If you were with me in the first webinar, you are going to see that some of the information, I'm sharing it again. And I think that is a way for me to make sure that you have the analysis and the understanding when working with women with precarious immigration status, refugee claimants, and immigrant women. Women who have precarious immigration status in Canada seek safety and support. So make sure that you don't contact the immigration or the criminal system if her status in Canada can be at risk. So through this webinar, we are going to talk about the safety concerns, safety risk assessment, safety planning, and resources in your community. Why women leave their countries of origin? And I know you have the answer. Many of you are maybe immigrants yourselves, and you understand that women come to Canada a lot of the time, not just because they like this country and they choose to live here. So when they are talking to you about abuse that is happening in their intimate relationship, some form of gender-based violence, domestic violence, it's very important to understand that may be reasons why she left her country that are attached to her relationship. And she may not be ready to leave an abusive relationship because exactly the reasons why she left her country, for example, forced migration, displacement, gender persecution, sexual violence, oppressive cultural practices, trafficking. And when we talk about trafficking, it could be that she was told that she was going to get a job in Canada, or maybe she knew that she was being trafficked, but it was her only way out to come to Canada and become safe from displacement or gender persecution or even poverty, sponsorship, family, or the intention to have a better future. Women also come to Canada as child brides. We come across many women who have been brought to Canada as child brides, and it takes some years for them to access support services. Forced marriages, mail order brides, poverty, as I said, fleeing country of origin with partner due to other forms of persecution. So the person who is currently abusing her, it may be someone who also suffer persecution and torture in their own country. So it's very hard for women to expose that person because, as you know, we care and we don't want to create more suffering for someone who we also love or is the father of our children. And there are other many reasons. So this safety assessment and safety planning for women with precarious immigration status, refugee and immigrant women takes in consideration their status, but also all the barriers and struggles that they may be facing. So before we go into the tool, I want to talk about the spiral of gender-based violence. Again, because as I said on the first webinar, is that women from different ethnicities, social class, gender identity suffer some form of gender-based violence. However, depending who we are within the structures of power and the access that we have to financial stability, again, our background, our ethnicity, the country we come from, we may experience violence different, more or less. Maybe systems are going to respond different, exactly based on who we are within the structures of power. So as I showed before, I want you to pay attention to the spiral of gender-based violence, because it's very important to know that when women are coming to us for support because they are experiencing abuse or violence in their intimate relationship, they are not dealing with a single issue that is currently happening as an adult woman. It could be that she is bringing childhood trauma from the time that she was born, growing up as a teenager. So sometimes, because of the past trauma, women present in different ways, right? And that's why it's very important to work from a trauma informed perspective, where we understand the behavior within a context, right? And understanding the impacts and the effects of past trauma, and how this may stop her from, again, living an abusive relationship, or even retaining information, understanding her rights, understanding her responsibilities, understanding even that she has the right to access some form of support. So starting with the tool, if you have the tool handy, you can see that we have client's information, name, and we have a question around gender identity. And we ask this question right in the beginning because we don't want to assume that this person who is sitting in front of us identifies a heterosexual woman, right? And maybe someone who has escaped from gender persecution because of her gender or their gender identity is the first time that someone is really acknowledging that she may choose to self-identify, right? So gender identity is the personal sense of someone's own gender. Gender identity can correlate with assigned sex at birth. So you can be born and identify as a woman, but doesn't mean that you feel that you or that you want to be a woman, right? So it can be that you don't want to identify as a woman or as a man, and you want to go into the spectrum of all genders, right? A person's gender identity may be the same as or different from their birth assigned sex. Gender identity is fundamentally different from a person's sexual orientation, and the person can go through the pronouns she, her, and hers, or they, their, and them. So once that you identify this, if you have the proper training within your organization, make sure that you provide specialized support. We're going to ask him for her phone number. Is safe to call? Ask the person if you can call her by using your first name and the other organization that you are calling from. If it's not safe to call, it's important to ask her to make a plan B. This plan may include calling a friend or a family member. Safety plan when calling. Ask the person if it is safe to call and block the number you are calling from. At Battered Women Support Services, usually our phone number is blocked unless the woman let us know that her phone cannot accept unblocked calls and that it's safe to call her with our number showing on the screen is what we do. She may want you to hang up if her partner answers the phone. She may want you to say you are a friend and to provide a different name. Safety plan if call goes to voicemail. Is it safe to leave a message? What kind of message is safe to leave? So these questions are straightforward, but sometimes service providers forget to ask all these details, and this can make a huge difference in the woman's safety. Age, country of origin. Has she lived in other countries previous to entering into Canada? Has she lived in other provinces within Canada? And this information is very important if she is going to be a refugee claimant or she has a precarious immigration status. Ethnic or racial identity. Immigration status. Gather as much information as the person is willing to provide. Remember that this information can be key when preventing her from being deported. So if she has precarious immigration status, why? Maybe she had a partner who offered to sponsor her and he never started the sponsorship. So now she's left without the status. She may have entered in ways of being trafficked or under the ground because again, she was being displaced or experiencing gender persecution and she doesn't know that she may have a case for a refugee claim. Temporary workers permit is important to ask also if the employer is treating her well, if there is abuse in that relationship with employer. Visitor's visa, has her visa expired? It is very important to ask the person if the visa is still current or when it's going to expire, because this can make a huge difference. Refugee claimant, convention refugee, permanent resident, sponsorship. Who is the sponsor? Where is this process at? Because again, as I mentioned at the last webinar, we had a case where the woman was waiting and waiting for the sponsorship to arrive. And then when she accessed our support, we called immigration and we found out that he never had started any sponsorship. She may be a Canadian citizen. And sometimes women, even though they have the citizenship, still they come with the fear that they are going to be deported because that's the story that the person who is abusing them has been telling them. Safety assessment. What is her first language? Remember, she may speak more than one language, English level, if she needs an interpreter, right? Because she may have intermediate level, but it's very hard for her to talk about feelings, to understand the language around the different legal systems. What is her source of income? She may have an odd job or a family member is sending money from overseas. She may be working underground. If this is the case, remember to provide information about the risk of working without permit, right? We know that people have to do everything they can to survive. And sometimes if they don't have a status, still they have to feed a child, to feed themselves. So but it's important to still provide information about her rights and responsibilities because we don't want her to get deported before we can support her through the immigration system. Whenever possible, support her with information and resources to access some form of income that will not jeopardize her immigration status. Sometimes we have access at church that they are willing to provide money, or we try to find donations for food. So try to find other resources that won't jeopardize her status. Safety partners information. So this is to assess how dangerous he is, what we call lethality assessment. So has this person ever been abusive or violent towards your client prior to coming to Canada? This information is very important because what we know is that violence in the intimate relationship, it doesn't start in Canada. Violence comes with the relationship, right? And it could be that he was very violent at home, and she had the hopes that once that they came into Canada, he was going to change. So this history is important to assess her safety. When one of the following factors that I'm going to mention are identified, this case should highlight as high risk. And I imagine that for your organization, you are going to have internal procedures to address a high risk case. So does this person have power to affect your client's immigration status? Has this person ever been charged here or abroad? Again, he may have no criminal record here in Canada, but she's aware that he has committed crimes against her other women or other men in his country. Does he have access to weapons? And within the criminal justice system in Canada, it is very important that an object is considered a weapon, right? So if he is making threats to throw a plate at her head, that is considered a threat to assault her with a weapon, right? And we know that many men sometimes make threats with the kitchen knives. Are there death threats? Again, within the criminal code in Canada, death threats are considered a crime. So we know with many immigrant communities, many men make death threats because in their country they feel that everybody does it and no one cares and the law is not there to protect women. So sometimes immigrant men do it without knowing that in Canada he can be arrested and charged with death threats. So if you have access to men who are making these kind of threats, also let them know about their rights and responsibilities and how the criminal system works in Canada. So if the woman wants to call the police, he hasn't beat her up, hit her, or assault her directly in any other way, and he only has made death threats, she has the right to call the police. Has he told her how he's going to do it, right? Because if you leave, I'm going to use a knife and kill you. If you leave, I'm going to tie, I don't know, some forms in which they try to intimidate women. Safety issues around physical violence. Is there strangulation? This question is very important because non-fatal strangulation by an intimate partner is a risk factor for major assault or attempt or completed homicide of women. Women who have experienced domestic violence commonly report non-fatal strangulation, sometimes referred to as choking. This type of violence is often minimized, missed, and misidentified by victims, frontline workers, health workers, and other service providers. Strangulation is both extremely dangerous and a risk factor for future serious harm and death. So this is very important to take it serious and also to bring this issue to her attention, right? Because many women who have access or support have disclosed that at least once he has tried to what they call choke her or strangle her. So we need to let her know that sometimes even he may not have the intention to do harm or to kill her. And he has this anger where he goes directly to try to strangle her, to stop her, or to, it's just about power and control, right? But the problem with this is that he can lose the control and he could kill her. Children's information. Indicate children's name, age, living or not living with mother, immigration status, and relationship to partner. Are their children living abroad? Is she applying to bring them to Canada? This question is important because sometimes this can be a factor that is stopping her from leaving. Does the abusive partner have the power to affect children's mobility from abroad? Current relationship status with that person who is abusing her. Is she currently single, meaning not living with him, dating him, living together? Are they in common law? Are they married? They have separated. Maybe just recently she left the abusive relationship, but she's thinking to go back. Other, and their relationship history, right? Because as we know, women leave, return, and then leave again. History of gender-based violence and abuse in current intimate relationship. So we usually ask the history of the gender-based violence because of the factors I mentioned before around childhood trauma and the impacts of traumatic situations that women may have faced in the past. So within the intimate relationship, we ask her about the different abuse that she's experiencing. So maybe isolation, he doesn't let her talk to the family, doesn't let her go to school, work, or have friends. Emotional abuse is he calling her names, putting her down, tell her that she is not smart and that she never is going to make it in life. Physical violence, right? From slapping, pushing, kicking her, beating her up, sexual abuse and violence. And many women who are in an intimate relationship where they are married, it's very hard for them to expose that they are experiencing some form of sexual abuse or violence because of this history of how women have been raised to submit, men are raised to dominate, and also this belief that if you are in a relationship with a husband, he has the right to ask you to have sex whenever he wants and in any way he wants, right? And even sometimes rape is not considered sexual violence with an intimate relationship because he has been telling her that he's a husband and he has the right to do this, right? So it's important to bring information to her attention and to ask this question. She may be hesitant to disclose the sexual violence that she has been experiencing, but hopefully you can build the trust and give the information so then she can disclose what is impacting her in her life. Financial abuse, he may be controlling her money. She may be forced to work and to provide the money to the extended family. He may be holding the money and not giving her money for food or for other expenses. Intimidation and threats, as I mentioned before, threatening to do harm to her, or that if she leaves, she's going to get her deported, or that she will take children away from her. Any other that is not in this list. Gender based violence and abuse, sorry, childhood abuse and violence. It includes incest. And again, these conversations are very hard. And it can be, or it may be, that this is the first time that she is asked this question. And of course, if we haven't built trust with her, she may not expose what she has been experiencing or what she has experienced in the past. Child bride, is she still with the person she was forced to marry? Has she left? Does she want to change her situation? I have worked with women who didn't disclose during the first appointment that they were child brides, but through some appointments, then they disclosed that actually they came to Canada at very young age. They were forced to marry with a man who was maybe 20, 30 years older than her, and now she's ready to leave. Arranged marriage, so same as above. Forced migration, it may include cultural practices that will impact her autonomy and safety. Harmful traditional practices exist in many different forms. These traditions reflect norms of care and behavior based on age, life stage, gender, and social class. While many traditions promote social cohesion and unity, others wear down the physical and psychological health and integrity of individuals, especially women and girls. Gender-based persecution. The discriminatory, oppressive, harmful, or abusive treatment of an individual based in their gender. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees lists a basic list of what kinds of activity can be classified as gender-based persecution. Acts of sexual violence, family domestic violence, coerced family planning, female genital mutilation, punishment for transgression of social norms, discrimination against people who identify as homosexual, among others. Political persecution. The definition of a convention refugee states that a claimant's fear of persecution must be reason of one of the five enumerated grounds, that is race, religion, nationality, membership in particular social group, and political opinion. Trafficked, Human trafficking involves the recruitment of transportation, harboring, exercising control, direction, or influence over the movements of person in order to exploit that person, typically through sexual exploitation or forced labor. Victims, mostly women and children, are deprived of their normal lives and compelled to provide labor or sexual services through a variety of coercive practices, all for the direct profit of their perpetrators. Exploitation often occurs through intimidation, force, sexual assault, threats of violence to the victims or their families. So when women are being trafficked, as I said before, she may knowingly came to Canada by someone who had offered access to maybe documents, status, a job, and in the moment she has to perform sex work. She may not want to leave that situation because she knows that she can be her only source of income, the only way in which she can escape from the violence and abuse that she has experienced in her country. So there are many factors. So it's very important we don't assume and we don't try to jump into rescue the person. We need to follow her lead and to understand all the barriers that she may be facing. So let's start little by little by providing the information and support until she can overcome those barriers and then make an informed decision about how she wants to continue living her life in Canada. And she may decide that she wants to work in the sex economies, right? And we respect that too. We care for her safety. Her safety is at the center. Have you accessed any support as a result of gender-based violence or abuse you have experienced? As we know, many immigrant women, refugee women with precarious immigration status, don't access any counseling, maybe a support worker, and maybe they come from countries where there is this stigma around if you access a counselor or a psychology, then means you have mental health issues, and then there is something wrong with you. So it is important to also provide information about the different ways of healing and supports that immigrant women can access within Canada, right? And there are free confidential services that they provide some support to them. I know for Battered Women Support Services, we provide counseling to women who have precarious immigration status. We don't require that she has an immigration status in order to provide any of the services we offer. So please include any short-term support, counseling, psychologists, or psychiatrists that the person may have access or may be currently accessing. We understand that many refugee and immigrant people do not trust police because they may have come from countries where they were tortured, criminalized, or disregarded by the criminal justice system. Also, we know that many women calling police is the last resort. Women want the violence to stop. They don't want the relationship to stop, right? Many women have the hope that their partner may change. Make sure that you clearly explain people's rights and responsibilities as it relates to the criminal justice system. Provide information about calling 911, about criminal justice system as it relates to domestic violence, as well as the person's right to ask for an interpreter when calling police. Have you called 911 before? Are you willing to call 911? What could stop you from calling 911? Let's not just assume and give the information and say, yeah, if you are unsafe, call 911. Many women have shared with me that they got that information, but actually they didn't know what is next, if they were going to be taken serious, or even if they had the right to ask for an interpreter. If there is violence or you are in danger, what would you do? It's important to ask her what does she know about her own safety? And what has been the safety plan that she has followed in the past, right? She has been longer in the relationship that we have been sitting with her, trying to make a safety assessment. So it is very important to gather her own knowledge and the different actions that she has taken in the past or she's currently taking. What are the current safety concerns? Physical safety, threats of being deported, threats of harming or killing a family member here or abroad, children's safety or threatening to take children away, sexual violence, jeopardizing employment. Has the violence or threats increased over the time? We know that violence in intimate relationships escalates over the time. The person who is experiencing abuse may minimize because she has not been hit. It is important to let her know that based on the patterns and abusive dynamics in relationships, we know that violence is going to escalate. Has the past violence ever resulted in injuries? Are there any current injuries? If yes, have you seen a doctor? Have you or someone you know documented the incident by telling someone else, writing down dates, times, and details of the incident, as well as taking pictures of marks or injuries? Encourage the person to document the incident and to go to the doctor as soon as possible. So we have women who come to our services that in the moment they may not want to call police and provide a statement, but we really encourage them to keep some record because that can become her evidence later. And also we have many cases where once that the woman is ready to call police and provide a statement, she has used past evidence to strengthen her case. Has your partner, ex-partner, threatened to hurt or kill you without or with a weapon? What kind of weapon? Be aware that knives or other objects are considered weapons. Has your partner, ex-partner ever threatened to commit suicide or self-injure if you leave? Or do you go back with partner or ex-partner? Be aware that many women get manipulated by the fear of partner killing himself. Let her know that it is not her responsibility and he should seek help. One of the risk factors when men are intimidating and threatening the woman with committed suicide if the woman leaves, we have seen that in cases where there has been women's homicide, the partner actually kills the woman and then he kills himself, right? So this should consider a risk factor. Have you been hurt by a member of your extended family, or has anyone threatened to hurt you or kill you here or abroad? We know that many women come to Canada and they not only live with the abusive partner, they also share the household with extended family, who in many cases women have disclosed that they also physically abuse them and of course emotionally, financially. So it is important to address these issues because these people also can be breaking the law, right? By holding her hostage, by getting the money from her, withholding food. So all those risks are important to address. Has your partner engaged with the criminal justice system here or abroad? Have there been any charges laid? Is there any kind of protection order here or abroad? For example, peace bond, non-contact order, or family law protection order? Do you have a copy of it? So if the woman doesn't understand what these kind of protection orders mean, please make sure that you explain about how the criminal system works here, and that having a copy of a peace bond can be a protection that she has in case that he tries to harass her or he comes to her place to make some kind of threats. Has your partner breached the protection order? Describe when and what happened. Have you reported this breach to police? When? Gather as many details names, and contact information as possible. Safety plan. What are the actions that you want to take at this time? Does she want to stay, leave, or return? It is important that we really address that she has the right to stay if she chooses to do that she can leave and then return because of many factors, but that we bring to her attention that it is important that she makes a safety plan at all times. Is there anyone, friend, neighbor, or family member who you may be able to reach out if you need help? What supports do you currently have? Can you contact any of them in case of emergency? Family, friends, neighbors, others? Provide information about shelters, safe housing, transition houses, and emergency lines in your region. So at the bottom of the tool, we have a list of resources. It is important that the woman understands the difference between shelters and transition houses. Transition houses are for women who are escaping from intimate violence. And a lot of transition houses have counselors, support workers. They offer support with providing food, sometimes clothing if she was not able to bring her own clothing, and women can be there for 30 days. Shelters also can provide the safety that she needs in the moment. However, some shelters don't have support workers, and they are mixed sometimes with families. They are not specialized in domestic violence. Safety plan if leaving. Remind the person not to share her plan with her children or someone who may disclose this plan to partner or extended family. If there are children involved, always assess children's safety and remind the person that whenever possible, it is important to bring children with her to a safe place. Some women sometimes have shared with me that they left the children with him because they wanted their children to stay at home, right? They didn't want to impact their children's way of living. However, later on, when we go to family court, the judge asked her, how come if he was dangerous, you left your children with him? So in many cases, the father ends having more parenting time. It was called custody and access. Now it's parenting time. So if she leaves the children with him, he will have access to ask for more parenting time. When are you planning on leaving? Provide information about the cycle of violence and the honeymoon period. Make note that in our experience, violence usually escalates over the time. So if she's going to stay because today he's treating her better, he has changed, we know that within the cycle of violence, many men who are abusive for a period of time may become nicer, give her flowers, communicate more, become less angry, right? So then she thinks that he's changing. And that happens for a period of time until there is another explosion. And he may get angry and become emotionally abusive, controlling, or maybe physically abusive. So we respect her decision of staying. However, it's important for her to understand what is the pattern and the cycle of abuse. What is your concrete plan if violence arises? What factors will make you safe while staying? Describe your support system while staying. Safety plan if returning, right? So she has left, but she is disclosing to you that she wants to go back with him and that she is talking over the phone with him. He maybe was charged in the past, but now she is allowed to go back. So it is important to, again, make a safety plan. What is your concrete plan if violence arises? What factors will make you safe while returning? Describe your support system while staying. Safety plan if leaving. Throughout the safety plan, provide support and information for the person to make an informed safety plan. Remember that the person has been in the relationship for a time, and person has a wealth of knowledge about dynamics of abuse and abusive patterns. It is important to remember that violence and abuse usually escalates after a woman has left, or if the abusive person gets any indication that she's planning to leave. It is imperative to highlight that she should not show any hint that she's planning to leave. What steps will you take before leaving? What steps will you take if your partner arrives while leaving? Can you identify signs or situations that will increase your partner's use of violence? Who lives with you? Safety plan if there are children living at home. Mothers can teach their children some basic safety planning. It is based on the belief that most important thing that children can do for their mothers and their families is to get away from the area of violence. It is known that children often try to stop the violence by distracting the abuser or directly interfering in the violent incident. It is important to tell children that the best and most important thing for them to do is to keep themselves safe. Children who experience or witness abuse or violence can be profoundly affected. And this is important that you share this information with the woman, right? I know sometimes we want to make threats about, oh, we are going to call the children of ministry and families development, social workers are going to get involved. And of course, we have legally, we are mandated to ensure the safety of a child, right? And we need to also explain to the woman how the child protection system works in Canada and what are her rights and responsibility as a mother, but also what are the rights of the children who live with her. That information is important, but I find that mothers get more impacted and thoughtful about the situation that their children are living when we describe all the traumatic impacts that a child can have. Personal safety and safety planning are extremely important and necessary for children whose families are experiencing violence. Children should learn ways to protect themselves. Safety plan if their children living at home. Is there a safe room inside your house, preferably with a lock on the door where your children can go? Whenever possible, mothers should make a safety plan for their children to go to a safe room as soon as violence arises. Is there a safe place outside your house where your children can go to? Describe safety plan for children. If there are children living with her, are they able to call 911 in case of emergency? So I have had many cases where women have disclosed to me that their children were the ones who called 911, usually children who are around 12 or older have been the ones calling 911. Have you shared with anyone that you are planning to leave? Do you have an emergency plan in case your partner or other family member stops you from leaving? Is your extended family or your community a resource or a risk for your safety? Explain. Do you need your worker to provide more information or to collaborate with you on making a safety plan? So if you follow the safety plan, you are already providing empowerment by asking all these questions. So I think it's very important that you, again, don't rush into rescuing her, but actually you ask her if she wants you to collaborate in making a safety plan. Describe workers' contribution to the personal safety plan. Do you need information on criminal justice system, family law, immigration law, CBSA, child protection? So at Battered Women Support Services, the majority of our support workers, legal advocates, counselors have the basic information about all these legal systems as it relates to domestic violence or sexual abuse or sexual violence. It is very important to have the general information about women's rights and responsibilities and how these systems work. because this information can make a huge difference in how a woman makes a decision of living, right? Because she has been carrying many wrong ideas about these systems or fears for all the reasons mentioned before, or all the things that he has told her about getting deported, taking their children away. So having access to information is going to strengthen her power and her ability to make a decision. Are you already dealing with any or an intersection of the systems above described? Yeah, many women we support are dealing with family law, immigration system, maybe child protection. What documents do you have and what documents do you need to get from your partner? Describe. So she knows about these documents, but when we are in crisis, sometimes we tend to forget. So let's make a list with her around remembering to keep copies or originals or birth certificates, passports, ID, bank statements, pay stubs, other. How are you coping? Following your internal policies and practices, make assessments on use of medication, prescribed or not prescribed. Person may be overtaking prescribed drugs just because it's the way in which she's coping with all the stress and sadness that she may experience. Use of substances. Person may be using substances such as alcohol, crystal meth, cocaine, marijuana, or other kind of drugs. So she may or may not disclose this, but it is important to ask the question and to also highlight that sometimes we access substances as a way of coping with all the impacts that we are dealing, and to let her know that there are other resources and supports that can be healthier than these ones. Suicidal ideation. She may have suicidal thoughts, but not a concrete plan. So many women, maybe 60% of the women who call our intake and crisis line, have disclosed that they have suicidal ideation. And what we know is that it doesn't mean that she wants to kill herself. She wants to stop the pain that she's feeling. She wants to change her situation. And sometimes suicidal ideation is a way of coping. So it is important to bring this to her attention and to make a really concrete assessment instead of jumping and getting into panic that now she wants to commit suicide, right? Because sometimes women get impacted about how support workers just respond kind of in a panic. And the woman says, but I just was thinking, it was just a thought, but I didn't have a plan. Remember that your client may be using these coping strategies as an attempt to mitigate her pain. The goal is not to stop her today, but to make an assessment to better determine the right supports. Plan to commit suicide. So I have come across a few cases where the person clearly states that she has a plan. And then in those cases, please follow your internal policies and practice to make an assessment and a safety plan. Self-injurious behaviors. So sometimes cutting, overeating, not eating, we consider that self-injurious behaviors. And of course, they are not healthy. But that's a coping strategy that the woman has come up with during hard times where she didn't have access to any supports, right? So if she shares some of these self-injurious behaviors, it is important that you don't jump into having a judgment about the behavior, but that you understand the behavior within a context. That she may have come from that spiral that I showed you, like childhood abuse, abuse in intimate relationships, forced marriage. So all these factors have been very hurtful. And it could be that these behaviors were the only ones that she could come up with as a way to continue surviving. Safety plan if leaving, follow plan after disappointment. Is there anything else that you want me to know? Follow plan. So we are almost going to the end of talking about the tool and making the assessment. And I just want to make sure again that you understand that we put at the center her self-determination and safety. Supporting our clients towards strengthening their self-determination so they can empower themselves and seek safety for themselves and their family. Familiarize yourself with resources for women who have experienced abuse and violence in your area. Listen to the woman's needs and concerns. Gather basic information about her situation. Do not let culture to excuse violence in intimate relationships, right? Many times we hear men and women saying, oh yeah, we are violent because it's in our culture, or men are violent because it's cultural, or in this ethnicity violence is normal because it's in their culture, right? So all of that are stereotypes that sometimes we as workers have internalized. So the women, make sure that you deconstruct those ideas and that nothing excuses violence towards women and girls. Explore with her what she needs at the moment and provide the appropriate resources. Respect her confidentiality. So you may be working with the whole family and may you decide to work separately. And then maybe one of the workers works with the husband, another worker with the wife. So make sure that confidentiality is kept at all times. Validate that she has already done to keep herself safe. Assess and provide a safety plan. Ensure she understands her rights in Canada. Ensure she has access to an interpreter who she can understand. Because as we know, sometimes there are interpreters who are actually just translating information that the woman doesn't have a clue what it means, whether it's in her language or in another language, right? So it is important to check with her that she's understanding the way in which the interpreter is transferring the information. Acknowledge that she may not understand the Canadian legal system, even when you have explained it. So you may have to explain it many times. Whenever possible, make a follow-up plan with the woman. Remember that you may be the first person in Canada whom she can trust. Women are the experts of their own experience and their healing journey. Violence against women is a result of systemic oppression, right? Don't individualize it. Don't make her the problem. The problem is the violence against women. So I'm sharing some resources here, but I know Bahar added a bunch of resources within the safety planning, safety assessment tool. Thank you very much for sharing this time with me. And as you know, I have a thick accent, so I know that sometimes it's hard, but I hope that you were able to understand everything I have shared, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Rosa. So I'll give everyone a chance to type in their questions to the questions box or email them to refugeehub@issbc.org. Um, we have one question so far. So the first question is, sometimes a woman comes in to the agency seeking language or employment supports and services, but ends up confiding in their frontline worker about the abuse that they're facing. So it might be an employment counselor or a link instructor, which, you know, that person is not necessarily trained or is the person to support them. But initially, if someone confides in you, how do you handle that? How do you hear it and not turn them away, or, you know, kind of quickly refer them off? How do you, that initial,
So can you read it again?
Yeah, so sometimes a woman comes in looking for language or employment supports and services, and builds the trust with that specific worker, and then confides in that worker about the abuse that they're facing. So how would you handle that initial?
So I usually will tell the woman, okay, I really appreciate that you are sharing with me what's going on in your life right now. And what I'm hearing is that you are experiencing some forms of abuse or violence in your intimate relationship, let's say. And I want to provide information to you about your rights and your responsibilities, and also the different supports that you can access. Is that something that you are interested to access right now? And the risk is that she may say no. I just share it, but I don't want to share anything else. And then we have to respect that, right? But I find that as soon as I tell women, because everywhere I go to do presentations, sometimes within the audience, I find out that someone is experiencing abuse in intimate relationship, and she's actually even working in the field, and she hasn't disclosed that. So sometimes they come to me, and then is what I say, right? Thank you for sharing this. And it takes a lot of courage to talk about this. There are many barriers that women face. And at this time that you are sharing this with me, I imagine that you also want to access to some supports. If you want, I can provide that to you. And the majority of cases, she will ask, right? As long as I don't get into the rescue mood, right? That I want to provide everything and I want to save her from some place where she has been there longer than I have. So that's why sometimes the first step is just disclosing, and for me as a worker to provide basic information.
Okay, great. So we have another question. What can we do, or what should we do if a client does have a suicide plan?
So at Battered Women Support Services, we have our internal practice and policy. So through the intake line or in person, when the woman has a concrete plan, we let her know that legally we are required to protect herself, right? Is when someone wants to do harm to herself or others, that we are required to protect her, and that we are going to have to call ambulance or police. So usually we let her know that we care about her, we care about her safety. Based on our assessment, we can see that she has a plan and that she has potential to go ahead with her plan. Like one case, we had a woman who disclosed that she had a bunch of medication and that she was planning to go home and to take it, right? So then we said, okay, so we are going to send the ambulance, and you may be taken to the hospital. They may decide to make an assessment, and sometimes ambulance comes with police depending the situation. So in that specific situation that happened in Vancouver, the ambulance went to her place. We kept her on the crisis line, and then when the first responders went into her house, they made an assessment, and then they just took the medication away from her, and they determined that she actually didn't need to go to the hospital, right? We have had other cases where from maybe a counseling appointment, the woman discloses also that she has a concrete plan, and based on our assessment, we determine that we need to call again police or ambulance, and then we do it. But we never leave her alone. It's not just in our case. We just it's not just calling and sending her somewhere. Like we make sure that she's treated with respect. We make sure that there is a follow-up plan, and we let her know all the way through, right?
We have another question about calling 911. So it says, can we talk more about the impacts of calling 911 with precarious status? If they fear deportation, what is the best way to reassure someone so that they feel they can call in an emergency? Are there safeguards in place to ensure someone isn't investigated or deported after calling for emergency services?
So in our case, working in Vancouver, we have done a lot of work with Vancouver Police Department, and they are very clear that one thing is the status and the other thing is the domestic violence that she is experiencing. So when she accesses our services and we convince her to access police because of her safety, and he is committing a crime because she has been physically abused or there is sexual violence, Then we call the police, let them know that we have someone who doesn't have a status and that she wants to give her statement. So then they come or we go to the police station, they take her statement and they don't call immigration on her. They only do their work around the criminal system. However, I don't know how it's in other areas, right? And how safe it is for women. My recommendation is that if she doesn't have a status, but she needs to call the police, that she goes to your organization and you, the worker, call the police prior to her giving the statement and let them know I'm a worker, I have a woman who is under these circumstances without giving her name or anything, just presenting the case. And then let them know that she doesn't have a status, but that we really care about her safety because the person she's living with is making threats or whatever is the situation. So then through that conversation, we can ensure that they are not going to call immigration, right? Some time ago, there was an incident in Vancouver where a woman ended being arrested at the SkyTrain, and the police transportation called immigration, and she ended being deported, and it's very sad situation. So we always make sure that service providers don't take on calling police or calling immigration or trying to get a support that can put herself at risk. So it is very important that we do it at the office, that we call police with her, that we ensure that they won't call immigration or jeopardize her status in any way, right? Calling 911 by herself, that's a harder thing, right? Because still, I think that she has the right to call 911 if she's in danger, but it's very hard to have control over what the police officers are going to do.
And would it be better to maybe have legal advice or have a
Yes,
lawyer prior to,
yes,
if it's a not a emergency situation, but you're kind of going into the police to talk
yes,
about something?
yeah.
Do you?
So at our office, as I said, working with the Vancouver Police Department, we know that it's safe, that they won't put her immigration status in danger. However, we always consult with our legal advocate or with a lawyer around what are the possibilities for her to stay in Canada, how we can start a process for her to apply for humanitarian and compassionate grounds or refugee claim if she has a claim. So we try to do that work as we are also dealing with the police, right? But in other areas, like Metro Vancouver or outside within the province. I'm not sure how RCMP are responding to. Maybe some people who are listening to this webinar can share with us because I'm not sure how RCMP is responding.
We have another question. So if you find out that a client is pregnant, especially so you find out a client is pregnant, especially in the early stage of pregnancy, what is the best approach? And they're facing domestic violence.
Mm-hmm. So again, we always have to put her at the center, and she is in charge of her life. However, we can always provide information, right? And what we know and is based on research, and also what we have observed throughout years of working with women who experience domestic violence, is that when women are pregnant, are more at risk. So because from the abuser perspective, being pregnant makes her weak, right? Makes her body is weaker, right? Because she's protective of a baby she has inside. Also, she may be depending on him. Now that she's pregnant, maybe she's worried that she won't have a job or that she needs the financial support. All these factors that come with mothers trying to protect their babies, right? So horrible violence has happened when women are pregnant, right? And it's very important to explain to her that based on research, we know that when women are pregnant, they are more at risk to experience violence or for the violence to escalate, right? And again, it's her decision to stay or to leave. Uh, Now she has the information about violence may escalate because you are pregnant, and to talk about her rights, right? If she were to leave, what are the things that she will need for her and her baby, right? Also, it is important, again, as I said throughout the webinar, that we need to provide information about child protection and let her know that even though she may not be abusing her child, if she is putting her child in a situation where the child is witnessing violence or is being abused by the father, the child can be apprehended, right? Because the child protection have a responsibility to ensure the safety of the child, the emotional safety, the physical safety.
I was actually going to ask that. So if there is a situation where there are children involved, um, what is and the woman is being abused, not necessarily the children yet, but it's possible that it could come up. What's the woman's responsibility there? Like, is she legally responsible in any way? Can she be charged with something or,
So we have many cases where the woman is being abused, but the children are not being abused by the father or the person who is abusing the mother. Uh, so there is nothing to do, right? Unless they are witnessing the violence, right? Or there is emotional abuse. And I'm saying this because when we go to family court, what is very sad is that the woman has experienced extreme violence, right? And then she doesn't want the abuser to have access to the children because he was very violent toward her, and also he was, let's say, emotionally abusive towards the children. The children may have witnessed some form of abuse. However, the judge decides that the father and the mother have the same right to have access to the children. So if she doesn't have clear and concrete evidence that he may be a risk uh, towards the children, then he's going to give access to the children, right? So that's kind of the part that we feel that is unfair about the family law system, that the women have to actually have a strong evidence about him abusing the children in order to stop him from accessing the children. Otherwise, fathers are given access to the children, and as we know, even when she leaves an abusive relationship, the abuse continues towards the children because every time that he goes to drop off the children, he yells at her, calls her names. Sometimes when women have shared with us that, let's say they have babies, and then they send a bag with clothing and diapers. And then when he returns the baby, he doesn't return the clothing. And then she's like, oh, but I need this clothing for the baby. Oh, no, buy more. Now it's mine, right? Like all these nuances that sometimes the judge doesn't see it as abuse, but then she has to be facing that every day, right? Every time that they have the exchange.
So we have time for one more question. This is an interesting one. The person asks, you mentioned nothing excuses violence, but let's say a woman explains that her partner's violence comes from a mental health challenge or a mental health issue. So you want to tend to the domestic violence, of course, but do you also consider what the partner is going through? Is there a different procedure when, for example, the partner has been diagnosed with a mental health disorder or issue?
So what we know is that the violence against women, domestic violence, happens because someone has power in the relationship, right? So domestic violence happens mainly because, in this case, a man has power and he wants to control the woman, right? And there are many factors that may trigger his behavior, right? He may be using alcohol, and then he may get more violent when he uses alcohol. He may have mental health issues, and then he may get violent because of this towards her, right? The interesting thing is that we know that men who are abusive towards their wives, they don't abuse their boss, they don't abuse their friend, their brother, right? So if he has mental health issues, how can he choose who he is going to abuse, right? Because my idea is that if you have mental health issues, then you're going to be abusive and violent towards everybody. And but when we do research, it's usually only towards the woman because she's vulnerable, because she loves him, or all the factors that we have mentioned, right? So I do believe that some people should be treated, right, for their mental health issue. But also what I have seen is that many men who are abusive, they don't access supports, because accessing counseling, accessing some form of support is going to stop the control that they have. They think that that power, if they go to a counselor, is going to be taken away. So then they are going to lose control over the woman. So we, of course, recommend that men, women, everybody should access a psychologist, counselors, psychiatrists, and everybody should work towards having mental health, right? And a healing process, right? But also we believe that it's very hard for men who are abusive, regardless if they do it because of mental health or substances. The behavior of being abusive is very hard to change it, because many men who are abusive are afraid to lose that control over the other person who is vulnerable.
Great. So that's all the time we have today for questions. Thank you for joining us, Rosa. We learned
Thank you.
so much. And thank you for developing the safety assessment and safety tool. That's something that we haven't had that was specific to women with precarious status and refugees and refugee claimants, because that's kind of a, additional stresses for the client. And it's a little bit different maybe than other women that do have status in Canada. And we will be emailing everyone an online evaluation form for this webinar, so please take time to complete it. And I'll also be sending out the handouts, so the safety assessment tool and also Rosa's presentation PowerPoint deck, and we'll be posting the video too. So if you want to use this as future training for your teams, all the information will be on the BC Refugee Hub. Again, we'd like to acknowledge the financial support of the province of British Columbia through the Ministry of Jobs, Trade and Technology. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks,
Thank
Rosa.
you. Thank you.